They called it a collaboration meeting, but everyone in that room knew it was Alyssa's one-woman Broadway show. She strutted into the glass-walled conference space in her cobalt blazer, nails clicking against the trackpad like each slide was a drum roll. The deck she pulled up? My deck. My backbone. My 3 years of sleepless nights and 4,000 lines of undocumented code written while my neighbors in San Francisco were still out partying on Valencia Street. She smiled like she'd just invented electricity in a yoga studio, and the investors leaned forward like disciples. My architecture, my load balancer schema, my baby, dressed up in her fonts and her smug delivery. I sat 3 chairs away, invisible but present, like a ghost tethered to its unfinished business. She said, "This schema was a breakthrough moment for us, with the kind of calm only someone who never had to debug a memory leak at 3 in the morning could muster." I remembered that exact moment, me sitting cross-legged on the hardwood floor of my studio apartment, Chipotle leftovers congealing in the carton, sweatpants covered in Cheeto dust, eyes dry from staring at the error log that kept throwing null pointers like confetti. That's when the idea hit me. That's when I wrote the patch that kept staging alive. But here was Alyssa, perfect hair that cost more than my rent, giving birth to our vision in front of venture capitalists who couldn't tell a lambda function from a latte. I clenched my fingers under the table so tightly the cheap pen I'd been holding cracked down the middle. 3 years. 3 years of carrying this company like a spine, while they bickered about logos and office plants. I built the authentication flow, the modular session manager, the very thing that allowed their innovation to breathe. And now I wasn't even a footnote. I wasn't a slide. I was the whisperer of ghosts, the patchwork fixer when junior devs set prod on fire, the person you only call when something breaks but never invite when it's time to brag. When the meeting ended, the applause was for Alyssa. The VCs shook her hand like she was Edison. I slipped out before anyone could catch my eye. Out in the parking lot, engine running, I sat with my hands locked on the steering wheel until the plastic creaked under the pressure. The world outside was sunlit, buzzing with scooters and coffee runs, but inside my car, it was silent except for the wheeze of the AC. That's when I knew it. I wasn't just exhausted. I was erased. That night, I went to a dive bar in the Mission with Lena, my old roommate from college who'd become a UX lead at a competitor. She listened to me vent, sipping her margarita like it was communion wine, eyes narrowing with every detail I unloaded. Finally, she said, "Maddie, you're the housekeeper in a tech mansion. They want it spotless, invisible. You scrub the blood off the tiles, they sip champagne in the foyer, and God forbid anyone sees you holding the mop." I laughed, bitter and hollow, because she was right. I thought about Alyssa's $600 haircut, about Josh, the CEO's nephew with his Yeezys who couldn't even spell OAuth, about every stand-up where I got cut off with a syrupy, "What Maddie means is," like I was some caveman banging rocks. I thought about the countless weekends I lost babysitting their busted CI pipeline. How my only applause was a passive-aggressive thanks in a company-wide email signed Best Roger. And in that booth, under the flicker of a neon beer sign, I realized something had shifted. Anger had fossilized into something heavier, colder. I wasn't just the ghost in the system anymore. I was the system. They could ignore me in meetings, delete my name from decks, smile while rerouting my work to clueless interns, but every line of that backbone still had my fingerprints. And ghosts? Ghosts don't forgive. 3 years sounds short until you measure it in sprints, deployments, and caffeine overdoses. I could map my entire life in error logs and JIRA tickets. While they were still arguing about whether our logo should be teal or millennial pink, I was wiring together the bones of a system that would one day carry tens of thousands of users without collapsing. Back then, we didn't even have ergonomic chairs, just folding seats and a dream. I was the one who made that dream breathe. Yet somehow, When the dream started paying rent in a glossy downtown office, I became the wallpaper no one noticed. I got emails at 2 in the morning that read like 911 calls, servers down, help, and I showed up. I duct-taped their broken staging together with sheer willpower. My work hummed in the background, smooth, clean, reliable. And when it worked, nobody saw me. Nobody thanked me. But when something broke, suddenly my name was in everyone's mouth like a curse. The day they unveiled the product to the press, they paraded out the sales team, Alyssa in her designer suit, and even Josh, the kid who once asked me if Bash was an app. Everyone got credit. Everyone but me. They called me Legacy, like my presence was some antique console gathering dust in the corner. Legacy. The word stuck like a splinter. What they meant was, we'd prefer not to see you. What they meant was, you're the insurance policy we hope never to claim. That night, Lena's words replayed in my head. The housekeeper in a tech mansion. She wasn't wrong. I polished every corner of the system until it gleamed, but my reflection never showed up in the shine. Instead, Alyssa strutted through stand-ups as if she had personally soldered the circuits with a golden pen. Every time she cut me off with her syrupy, "What Maddie means is," I could feel myself shrinking into some shadow creature, tolerated but unseen. The worst part wasn't the invisibility. It was the erosion. Piece by piece, they chipped away at my worth until I started believing I was nothing but a back-end gremlin. Until I found myself apologizing for things that weren't even my fault. A broken pipeline? Sorry. Intern forgot to close a loop? Sorry. CEO's nephew crashed staging by pushing untested code? Sorry. 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 It was like my default function had become apology. But deep down, under the tiredness, under the apologies, something else was simmering. Every sigh in a meeting, every smirk when they brushed me aside, every weekend I lost to their chaos, those weren't just frustrations. They were kindling. And I knew, sooner or later, something was going to strike a match. The match struck on a Tuesday morning, disguised as a casual desk-side chat. Alyssa appeared with that Stepford smile she wore like armor, holding a latte that probably cost $15. She leaned against my desk like we were girlfriends swapping skincare tips and said, "So, Maddie, we're going to reassign the O-layer work for visibility reasons." Her tone was soft, syrupy, but every syllable sliced clean through me. Visibility. That was the excuse. Not performance, not skill, not bandwidth. Visibility. Translation. The CEO's 23-year-old nephew needed to look like he was more than a mascot in Yeezys. Josh Whitman. The boy wonder who once confused OAuth with oat milk. The same kid who thought synchronous meant coding in your pajamas. The same intern-turned-pet project who called my scripts old school while still Googling how to exit Vim. And now, apparently, he was the face of the system I bled for. Alyssa framed it like an opportunity, like it was such a blessing for me to mentor him, but I knew exactly what she was doing. Strip my work of my fingerprints, hand it to a golden boy, and erase me from the equation. I smiled. That's the worst part. I actually smiled. I nodded like a good soldier, bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper, and said something like, "Of course, whatever's best for the team." My voice even sounded convincing, but inside, something cracked. Not the kind of crack you can patch with sleep or whiskey. A deeper fracture, the kind that doesn't heal. All day, I watched Josh strut around with his Yeezys squeaking on the polished office floor, laptop covered in stickers he didn't understand, telling anyone who would listen that he was taking over the core layer. He winked at me once, like we were in on some private joke, and I had to look away before my face betrayed me. By the time I got home that night, I was shaking. I poured a double shot of whiskey, stared at my laptop like it was both a lifeline and a coffin, and tried to convince myself I could let it go. But I couldn't. Not when my code, my system, my 3 years of invisible labor were being handed over to someone who thought CICD was a band. That's when the idea started forming. Not revenge, not yet, just the faint outline of possibility. I didn't know exactly how I'd do it, but I knew this much. If they thought they could cut me out of the picture, they had no idea what picture they were standing in. Because the frame was mine. That night, the whiskey didn't burn enough to blur the edges. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my tiny apartment, laptop balanced on my knees, the glow bleaching my face like a morgue light. My fingers scrolled through years of archived emails, junk, forgotten receipts, Slack exports, desperate late-night bug reports. At first it felt pathetic, like clinging to scraps, the digital equivalent of sifting through old shoeboxes after a breakup. But somewhere between a DoorDash confirmation for drunken pad thai and a spam reminder to hydrate or dehydrate, I found it. A dusty PDF attachment buried in a thread labeled Independent Contractor Agreement. Dated, time-stamped, signed by the company's first head of legal, back when our office was a rented corner in a WeWork that smelled like burnt coffee. The language was dry, but my pulse picked up with every line. Ownership of code remains with contributor until formal transfer of rights. Contributor retains license over any original frameworks created during contractor phase. Translation: they thought they owned me, but they didn't. The backbone of their shiny empire still carried my name in the fine print. They took the house, but I still held the deed. I leaned back against the wall, the cheap plaster cool against my spine, and read it again, slower this time, letting every word settle like a stone sinking into water. 3 years they had dismissed me, 3 years of being the ghost in their machine, and all along the ghost had teeth. My name, my rights, notarized and archived. They never cleaned it up, never bothered. Why would they? In their world, I was invisible. I closed my eyes and remembered those first weeks. Me and Nick, the CTO, crammed into that flickering co-working space, tossing files back and forth like contraband, trying to stitch together something that could survive a demo. His email was in that same thread. "We're good to go, Maddie. You keep ownership until we bring you on formally. This gives us room to move fast now. Clean up legal later." Except later never came. They'd built skyscrapers on a foundation they didn't own. It hit me then, the kind of calm that doesn't feel calm at all, but heavy, metallic, like the air before a thunderstorm. For weeks, for years, I'd been gaslit into believing I was lucky just to have a seat in the room. But now I saw it for what it was. They weren't the landlords, they were squatters, and I wasn't some disposable janitor cleaning up their mess. I was the architect. The system they worshipped was mine in ink, in law, in blood. I wanted to laugh, but it came out jagged, like a cough. The absurdity of it all, Alyssa's presentations, Josh's swagger, the CEO's hollow speeches about team innovation, all of it balanced on a lie. And buried in my Gmail was the receipt that could topple them. It wasn't just relief, it was power. The kind of power you don't brag about. The kind you tuck close, polish in secret until the right moment comes. I stared at the PDF until the words blurred, until I had to blink away the heat in my eyes. Rage had always been my engine, but this was something different. This was validation, proof that I hadn't been crazy, hadn't been petty, hadn't been invisible at all. I wasn't a ghost. I was the owner. When I finally shut the laptop, the city outside had gone quiet. Streetlights hummed, a siren wailed in the distance, but all I could hear was the faint, steady thrum in my chest. Not excitement, not fear. Something deeper. The realization that for the first time in years, the rules weren't theirs to write anymore. They were mine. The days that followed were a circus on fire. Josh and his band of hypebeast interns pushed build after build into staging like toddlers throwing spaghetti at a wall, and every time it slid off in a mess, my Slack lit up with pings. Hey, Maddie, was this fallback logic yours? Legacy decisions causing issues again? Could you hop in real quick and fix it? Legacy. Cute how that word rolled off their tongues like perfume when things worked, and like poison when they didn't. My code had run flawlessly for 2 years. 2 years. Now the minute Josh touched it, it folded like a dollar store lawn chair, and suddenly I was expected to patch the holes with a smile. Stand-ups became tribunals. Alyssa standing at the front, arms crossed, smiling that Stepford smile, while Josh stumbled through updates and lobbed grenades in my direction. Yeah, maybe the system's just outdated. Maddie, did you leave notes for the error handling? Outdated. Notes. As if I hadn't documented every critical pathway while they were still trying to figure out how to bill users. I bit my tongue, nodded, acted professional, while inside, the rage piled higher than their bloated Jira backlog. Nights blurred into each other. I'd come home, dump my bag, and pace my apartment like a caged thing. Sometimes I'd start writing a resignation email, long, scathing, surgical. Sometimes I'd snack my way through a bag of kettle chips, furious chewing as a substitute for the screaming I couldn't do at work. The whiskey bottles lined up on my counter like soldiers watching me unravel. I told myself to let it go. I had savings, a severance clause, a lease that practically paid itself. I could walk away, let the clowns set their tent on fire. Let Alyssa bathe in LinkedIn glory while the servers melted under Josh's clueless fingers. But then the alerts would buzz my phone, or a smug Jira comment would ping, or a Slack DM would drip with fake concern, and the matchbox in my chest would rattle louder. Every accusation, every sly dig, every weekend I'd already lost. It all became kindling stacked in neat rows, waiting for the spark. And that's when I started looking. Not for another job, not yet. For leverage, for the places where their house of cards leaned too heavy on the foundations I'd poured. Because one thing about ghosts, we learn where the bones are buried, and I knew exactly which bones were still mine. I held out for 3 nights, convincing myself I could be the bigger person, but the emails kept gnawing at me. Those old threads like glowing embers at the bottom of a fire pit. Finally, I caved. I scheduled a Zoom with Nick, the only decent relic left from the early days, the guy who used to sit across from me in a dingy WeWork, drinking gas station coffee while we patched together what would become their golden goose. When he appeared on my screen, he looked older but calmer, his background a trendy open office with fake ferns and real interns buzzing around. I gave him the short version. Alyssa had reassigned my system to Josh. Now it was breaking. Now they were blaming me. He squinted, leaned forward, eyes narrowing the way they used to when he spotted a bug no one else could. Wait, the base system? The session manager? That's still yours, right? I angled my webcam so he could see. The registry entry, the emails, the PDF with my name stamped across it like a watermark. For a moment, the noise of his office faded. His face shifted from casual to laser-focused. Holy hell! They never cleaned this up. Maddie, you still own the damn backbone. He checked something on his end, fingers flying across the keyboard. Even the provisional patent, still under your name. They probably didn't want to trigger an audit before their next funding round. My stomach dropped and soared at the same time. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't petty. I wasn't invisible. I had leverage, real, legal, teeth-bearing leverage. When we hung up, I sat there staring at my screen, 36 tabs open. Software licensing enforcement, DMCA takedowns, contractor rights, lien filings. It was dense, confusing, like eating fire. But the more I read, the hotter I burned. Turns out you can file a lien on code. If you authored it, licensed it under your terms, and they deployed it without your consent, you could slap a lock on their shiny product. A lock only you held the key to. So I did. quietly, elegantly. No flaming monologues, no smashed laptops. Just a notarized form uploaded to the copyright office. A digital signature. A timestamp. The silence afterward was deafening, heavier than any applause. I stared at the confirmation ping like I'd just dropped a landmine under glass. But I wasn't done. Filing the lien was the legal padlock. I wanted the practical one. I pulled the most recent repo clone, the one I'd stashed before they revoked access. Nested deep in the deployment pipeline was the init file, the heartbeat of the system. And into it, I tucked a needle, a single verification call. Lightweight, encrypted, obfuscated. It pinged a license server. My server. If the check failed, deployment halted. No crash, no chaos, no obvious bug. Just a clean, cold stop. A single line in bold white letters. Unauthorized deployment. Pay license holder to continue. Elegant. Quiet. Like leaving a landmine under a Persian rug. I didn't broadcast it, didn't warn them, didn't even hint. Let them march forward high on their own fumes. Let Alyssa polish her LinkedIn post. Let Josh rehearse his little demo. They thought they'd locked me out. They didn't realize I'd already locked them in. Launch day came dressed like a wedding. The Slack channels exploded with champagne bottle emojis. The interns had Zoom filters of confetti raining down, and the CEO strutted through the war room like a groom waiting for his vows. Alyssa wore a silk blouse that belonged 2 tax brackets above her pay grade, holding a glass of sparkling rosé as if she'd just orchestrated a moon landing. She gushed in the general channel, paragraphs dripping with self-congratulation about what innovation looks like when a team believes. My name, of course, was nowhere. Not in the press release, not in the announcement, not even buried in a code comment. Sanitized like I was a PR risk, and not the reason their whole damn platform could breathe. Josh was the star of the hour, Yeezys squeaking as he bounced in his chair, laptop plastered with stickers he didn't understand. He kicked off the demo with a grin like a kid unwrapping Christmas, narrating each step as though he had written even a single functional line. Alyssa nodded, smiling at the investors on the call, polishing her halo in real time. I watched from my apartment, coffee in hand, the hum of my air conditioner louder than their applause bleeding through the live stream. They merged the final branch into main, hit deploy, and the logs began their elegant climb. Pipelines purred, front-end lights blinked green, dashboards flickered to life. For a second, it looked like they had gotten away with it. For a second, I wondered if maybe I'd overplayed my hand. Then it happened. Silence. The kind that doesn't just pause the room. It eats it. Production froze mid-deploy. Front-end loaded, back-end choked, admin panel stalled. And across every dev terminal, every client-facing interface, every shiny dashboard they had spent months polishing, the screen went black. One line appeared in bold white text, pulsing like a heartbeat. Unauthorized deployment. Pay license holder to continue. Not an error, not a crash, not a messy stack trace they could wave away. A wall. Cold, precise, untouchable. The trapdoor creaked open and swallowed them whole. In the Slack general channel, panic bloomed like wildfire. Is this a test file? Anyone else seeing the block screen? Can we roll back? Where's Josh? Where's Maddie? Meanwhile, the client support queue detonated with calls from customers who had expected a launch day miracle and got a brick wall instead. Sales reps shouted, marketing scrambled. The CEO stormed into the dev war room yelling about optics and investor calls. One VP even tried manually rebooting servers like she was resetting a Wi-Fi router. It was chaos dressed in business casual. And me? I didn't move. I set my coffee mug down with the soft click of ceramic on wood and leaned back. No gloating, No dramatic speech, just the slow exhale of someone who had been holding her breath for 3 years. The system had spoken for me, line by line, no emotion, no bias, just truth. Alyssa tried to play anchorwoman in the storm, her voice syrupy with manufactured concern. "It's Maddie," she said, shaking her head, eyes wide like she was heartbroken. "She must have sabotaged the deploy. You know how unstable she's been since her work got reassigned." Unstable, resentful, the script she'd rehearsed in case things went sideways. But she hadn't counted on the Lien, because while the CEO screamed, while investors flooded the chat with question marks, while HR drafted their sanitized statement, legal walked in holding my Lien filing, stamped, signed, certified. They didn't even make it through the second paragraph before Alyssa's face drained of color like expired milk. My ownership wasn't theory. It was law. And suddenly, the empire she'd paraded in silk and smiles had no foundation left to stand on. Slack burned like a live crime scene. Threads stacked 100 messages deep. Engineers typing in all caps. Sales pinging anyone who looked alive. Clients threatening refunds before the ink was even dry on their contracts. I sipped my coffee and watched. Somewhere in the chaos, a junior dev posted screenshots of the black screen. My black screen, with the license message blinking like a warning siren no one could shut off. In the war room, Alyssa slid into the center of the storm, face arranged into an expression of wounded professionalism. "It's Maddie," she insisted, voice syrupy and sharp all at once. "She's been resentful. You've all seen it. This is sabotage." She used words like unstable, disgruntled, rogue, painting me as the archetypal bitter ex-employee, the ghost haunting the system out of spite. And for a moment, some people believed her. I could feel it in the way HR drafted their "we're investigating" statement, in the CEO's spit-flecked rant about betrayal. But then, legal spoke. The general counsel, pale as printer paper and sweating through his collar, held up the Lien filing like it was radioactive. "This was submitted 2 weeks ago," he said, voice brittle. "Filed with the Copyright Office, certified, notarized. It names Madison Carter as the sole license holder of the base system." The room went dead quiet. Someone whispered, "She what?" Alyssa froze, her Stepford smile cracking at the edges, eyes darting like a cornered animal. The CEO grabbed the document, skimmed it, his face twitching as realization settled in. This wasn't sabotage. This was ownership. This was the law standing in the middle of his champagne-soaked launch party, telling him the bride had married someone else years ago. The investors caught wind within minutes, and their questions turned into demands. Where was the audit trail? How had they failed to update ownership? What liability were they exposed to? And me? I answered the phone when legal finally called, their voice thick with static and panic. "We need to talk," the counsel rasped. I didn't even sit up. Just let my tone flatten into the deadpan I'd perfected after years of midnight bug hunts. "As per Section 8.2 of the original contractor agreement, use without license constitutes material breach. You'll want to settle before your investors start asking why you launched without rights." Silence on the other end, heavy and suffocating. Then the inevitable question. "How much do you want?" I didn't answer. Not yet. I let the silence stretch until it became its own kind of violence, until they could feel in their bones the same helplessness I had felt for 3 years. Because this wasn't sabotage. This was justice written in code and ink, stamped, certified, and timed to detonate. By Friday morning, Alyssa was on leave pending investigation, which is boardroom code for pack your ring light and start scrubbing your LinkedIn. HR revoked her Slack access before lunch, though not before she blasted out one last all-hands email about how this wasn't goodbye, just see you later. Cute. I forwarded it to my trash folder without even opening. Later would be deposition, not reunion. The CEO didn't survive much longer either. Investors called for his head after 2 major clients pulled out, citing platform instability. Translation: your golden product locked up like Fort Knox in the middle of a demo, and the room smelled like fear. He was quietly transitioned into a strategic advisory role, which in tech usually means drinking on a yacht while someone else untangles the wreckage you left behind. Legal came crawling next. Their voices had lost the steel, replaced with honeyed desperation. They offered 7 figures in retroactive licensing fees, my name restored on every public document, patents, code bases, even the pitch deck they'd sanitized me out of. They even dangled the option of bringing me back in-house, like a prodigal child. I almost laughed. They thought a paycheck and an apology footnote could erase years of erasure, could make me forget how they'd turned me into a ghost. I told them I'd think about it. Then I ghosted them instead. A week later, Carter Systems LLC was more than a half-finished logo in a Canva tab. It was real. My company, my terms, my code. I licensed the very same system to 3 of their competitors within 2 months. Each paid on time. Each credited me as the author. Each treated me like the backbone I was. One even asked if I'd keynote their developer summit. I declined, but the invitation itself felt like vindication. No more stand-ups where I was spoken over. No more babysitting interns who thought OAuth was a coffee order. No more watching my work paraded around by people who couldn't spell bash. Just clean contracts, clean code, and a calendar that answered only to me. The empire I'd built for them had crumbled because they forgot the most basic rule of systems design. Never ignore the architect. Some people build empires. I build tripwires. That was the thought running through my head one quiet morning as I logged into my own system, coffee steaming beside me, the city outside still yawning awake. Carter Systems had signed its 3rd client that week, a direct rival to my old company. They wanted speed, reliability, elegance, all the things I'd built from scratch. I ran the final check, confirmed the handshake, and hit deploy. For a moment, everything purred. Then the screen flickered once, twice, and froze. The same bold line appeared like a ghost from the past. Unauthorized deployment. Pay license holder to continue. Turns out their CTO had tried to clone my framework without a valid key. Turns out their golden hire used to be Alyssa's little protege. The irony was so sharp I almost laughed out loud. I didn't. I just leaned back, sipped my coffee, and let the silence settle. Revenge doesn't need fireworks when you have receipts coded into the DNA of the system. I thought back to those nights hunched on my apartment floor, greasy takeout cartons around me, heart hammering as I patched memory leaks alone. Back then, I thought invisibility was my curse, that being overlooked was proof I didn't matter. But now, I understood. Invisibility was cover. They couldn't steal what they couldn't even see I was protecting. I had been biding my time, waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. When people talk about justice, they imagine swords and speeches, maybe HR drama or public meltdowns. But justice can be quiet too. A notarized document, a line of code, a silent wall that refuses to move. That was my justice. Cold, elegant, untouchable. Alyssa was gone. The CEO reduced to a whisper. My old company limping through investor calls with a patched-together skeleton of what I'd built. And me? I wasn't shouting from rooftops. I wasn't plastering my name on billboards. I was sipping coffee, signing contracts, living on my own terms. Because real power doesn't gloat. It executes. I closed my laptop, stretched, and let the morning light wash over me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like the architect I had always been. And the best part? The system would keep reminding them, again and again, with every failed deploy, with every unauthorized clone. My name was etched into its bones, immutable, permanent. They could forget me in their meetings, in their speeches, in their sanitized slide decks. But the code never forgot. The code always remembered.